He called her the starter wife, a practice run. When Marcus Thorne flaunted his new fiancée Tiffany, a 20-something Instagram model, he told his friends she was a real upgrade. He said it loud enough for his ex-wife Eleanor to hear. He wanted it to sting, and it did. For 2 years, Eleanor Hayes vanished into obscurity, nursing a shattered heart and a decimated sense of self-worth. But what happens when the starter wife doesn't just get a new life, but builds an empire? What happens when she reappears not as a forgotten ex, but as the CEO bride of a reclusive tech billionaire, holding the fate of her ex-husband's company in the palm of her hand? This isn't a story of revenge. It's a story of resurrection. The divorce papers felt like a final, formal amputation. For 12 years, Eleanor Hayes had been Eleanor Thorne. Her identity had been so entwined with her husband's that she now felt like a ghost haunting her own life. Marcus Thorne, a man whose ambition was as sharp and cold as the cut of his Tom Ford suits, had decided she was no longer a valuable asset in his portfolio. Their life together had been a meticulously curated performance of success. A brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, weekends in the Hamptons, and a social calendar that read like a who's who of New York's financial elite. Eleanor had been the perfect partner. She'd managed their home, hosted flawless dinner parties, and edited his proposals until 3 in the morning, her sharp business acumen, honed by a Wharton degree she'd never been allowed to use, sanding the rough edges of his brash ideas. She was the silent architect of his ascent at Sterling & Pierce, the investment firm where he was a rising star. The end came swiftly and without sentiment. Marcus had met Tiffany Sterling. Yes, Sterling, as in the daughter of one of the firm's founding partners. Tiffany was 24, with hair the color of champagne and a social media following that numbered in the millions. She didn't know the difference between a stock option and a futures contract, but she knew the right angles for a selfie at St. Bart's. "It's just business," Marcus had said, his voice devoid of any emotion as he packed his monogrammed suitcase. "I'm moving up. You should be happy for me." Eleanor wasn't happy. She was hollowed out. The settlement was insultingly modest. Marcus argued that since he was the sole earner, she was entitled to little more than a transitional stipend. Her lawyer, a timid man overwhelmed by Marcus's high-powered legal team, had advised her to take it. So she did. She moved from their 4,000-square-foot brownstone to a 400-square-foot studio apartment in Queens with a window that looked out onto a brick wall. The silence was the worst part. The silence where his booming voice used to be. The silence where their shared laughter once echoed the silence that screamed her failure. She took a job doing administrative work for a small, non-profit organization. The pay was meager, but it was a reason to get out of bed. Her brilliance was relegated to organizing spreadsheets and scheduling meetings. Her Wharton degree collected dust in a box under her bed. 2 years passed in this muted existence. 2 years of rebuilding one painful brick at a time. She started running, pounding the pavement of Astoria Park until her lungs burned, and the voice in her head telling her she was worthless grew quiet. She started reading again, not market reports, but novels, poetry, histories. She was slowly, painstakingly rediscovering the woman she was before Marcus Thorne, Eleanor Hayes. The encounter happened on a Tuesday. Her non-profit was hosting a small charity gala at the Pierre, a place she and Marcus used to frequent. She was there to check guests in wearing a simple black dress and a name tag. She felt a familiar pang of anxiety, a fear of running into someone from her old life. And then it happened. Marcus and Tiffany glided through the entrance, a vision of polished perfection. He wore a custom tuxedo, and she was poured into a shimmering gold gown that probably cost more than Eleanor's annual salary. They were laughing with another couple hedge fund manager, Robert Ackman, and his wife. Eleanor froze her heart, hammering against her ribs. She tried to shrink behind the check-in table, hoping they wouldn't see her. But Marcus's eyes, like a predator's, scanned the room and locked onto hers. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. He steered his group directly toward her. "Well, well," he began, his voice laced with condescending amusement. "Eleanor, working the door, how industrious." Tiffany looked her up and down, a flicker of something pity-disgust in her eyes. "Marcus, darling, you know her. This is my ex-wife," Marcus announced to the group, the words dripping with satisfaction. "The one I was telling you about." He leaned in, placing a possessive hand on Tiffany's waist and pulling her close. He looked from Tiffany's sparkling beauty back to Eleanor's plain black dress and tired eyes. Then he delivered the line that would echo in her mind for months. "This," he said, gesturing to Tiffany, "is a real upgrade. Don't you think, Robert, out with the old reliable sedan in, with the new Italian sports car?" Robert Ackman chuckled uncomfortably. Tiffany preened, basking in the compliment. But Eleanor felt the words like a physical blow. The air rushed out of her lungs. In that moment, in front of people who had once been her friends, she had been reduced to a used car, obsolete, traded in. She kept her composure, her face an unreadable mask, and simply said, "Your name, please." Marcus smirked. "Thorne. It's on the list, I'm sure." She found their names, handed them their table number, and didn't watch them walk away. She stared at the floral arrangement on the table until the petals blurred into a watercolor of shame and rage. The sting wasn't just about the insult, it was the public declaration of her worthlessness. He hadn't just divorced her, he was trying to erase her, to rewrite their history, so she was nothing more than a footnote, a starter wife. That night, Eleanor didn't sleep. She sat by her small window, staring at the brick wall, the echo of Marcus's words playing on a loop. "A real upgrade. A real upgrade. A real upgrade." The humiliation burned. But as the sun began to rise over Queens, something else began to burn alongside it. Not just anger, but fire. He thought she was a sedan, reliable, boring, easily discarded fine. He had no idea what kind of engine she had under the hood. He'd spent 12 years keeping her in the garage. Now, the garage door was open, and Eleanor Hayes was done being parked. She pulled the box from under her bed, blew the dust off her Wharton degree, and opened a laptop. The time for mourning was over. It was time to build. The fire that ignited in Eleanor that night didn't fizzle out. It became a controlled burn, a focused, all-consuming energy. She didn't waste it on fantasies of revenge, she channeled it into resurrection. She remembered a business proposal she had drafted years ago during the brief period after business school before Marcus convinced her that his career needed to be their singular focus. It was a disruptive concept for the logistics industry, centered on using AI-driven predictive analytics to create hyper-efficient, sustainable supply chains. Marcus had glanced at it once and dismissed it as a cute little academic exercise. She pulled the old files from a dusty hard drive. The core idea was still brilliant, but technology had evolved. For 3 months, Eleanor lived a double life. By day, she was the quiet administrator at the nonprofit. By night, she was a driven entrepreneur, updating her plan, running financial models, and researching the current market landscape. She devoured articles on venture capital, studied pitch decks from successful startups, and taught herself to code Python to build a rudimentary prototype of her software. Her tiny apartment transformed into a war room, the walls covered in whiteboards filled with algorithms and flowcharts. The opportunity to present her idea came from an unlikely source. A flyer at a local coffee shop announced the Innovate NYC Tech Symposium, a major conference attracting investors and tech titans from around the globe. The keynote speaker was Damien Chevalier. Chevalier was a legend in the tech world, but a ghost in the public eye. He had founded his first company, a revolutionary data encryption firm, in his garage and sold it for 9 figures before he was 25. Since then, his company, Chevalier Innovations, had become a behemoth, with quiet investments in everything from biotechnology to aerospace. He was known for being ruthlessly intelligent, intensely private, and having an almost supernatural ability to identify the next big thing. He rarely made public appearances. Getting a ticket to the symposium was financially impossible for Eleanor. But the flyer mentioned they needed volunteers. She signed up immediately. For 2 days, she worked tirelessly, handing out lanyards, directing attendees, and refilling water pitchers. She was invisible, just another cog in the machine, but her ears were open. She listened to every conversation, absorbing the language of Silicon Valley, the buzz of ambition. On the final day, during a coffee break, just before Chevalier's keynote, she saw her chance. Chevalier was standing near a service corridor, speaking quietly with one of his lieutenants. He wasn't surrounded by the usual sycophantic crowd. A subtle but impenetrable aura of authority kept most people at a distance. As he finished his conversation, he turned to walk towards the stage. It was now or never. Eleanor intercepted him, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "Mr. Chevalier," she said, stepping into his path. He stopped, his eyes, a startlingly intense shade of grey, fixing on her. He was taller than she expected, with an ascetic air that was more academic than corporate. He looked at her volunteer badge, a flicker of impatience crossing his face. "I'm about to go on stage." "I know. This will take 30 seconds, she said, her voice firm but respectful. "You are investing billions in green energy, but the supply chains that deliver those technologies are one of the world's biggest polluters. It's a foundational hypocrisy in the sustainable economy." His eyebrows rose slightly. The impatience was replaced by curiosity. He had expected a fawning fan or someone with a resume. He hadn't expected a direct intellectual challenge. "Go on." "Logistics is the circulatory system of commerce." Eleanor continued the words she'd rehearsed 1,000 times, flowing effortlessly. "Right now, it's having a heart attack. Inefficient routes, empty return journeys, last-mile redundancy. I've developed an AI-driven platform that doesn't just optimize, it predicts. It learns from global data streams, weather traffic, consumer demand, port congestion, to create a self-healing carbon-negative logistics network. It's not just an improvement, it's a paradigm shift. Think of it as Waze for global freight, but with a conscience." She held his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. She saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a recognition. He wasn't looking at a volunteer, he was looking at an equal. He was silent for a long moment. One of his aides stepped forward, ready to dismiss her. Chevalier held up a hand. "What's your name?" "Eleanor Hayes." He nodded slowly. "You have a business plan for this paradigm shift, Ms. Hayes." "A 70-page plan, a working prototype, and 5-year P&L projections," she said, without blinking. A rare thin smile touched his lips. He pulled a simple, elegant business card from his jacket. It contained only his name and a private email address. "Send it to me. If it's half as compelling as your pitch, we'll talk." He then turned and walked toward the stage, leaving Eleanor standing in the corridor, her hand trembling as she clutched the single most important piece of paper she had ever held. That evening, she sent the email. The subject line was simple: the foundational hypocrisy. Inside, she attached her comprehensive plan. She didn't expect a reply for weeks, if ever. The reply came in less than an hour. It was 3 words: "My office, tomorrow, 10 a.m. The Chevalier Innovations headquarters was a sleek, minimalist tower in Hudson Yards that seemed to pierce the clouds. It was a world away from her cramped Queen's apartment. Eleanor wore her only suit, a charcoal grey outfit she'd bought for a job interview years ago. She felt out of place among the effortlessly cool tech employees, but she walked with a confidence she hadn't felt in over a decade. She was led not to a standard meeting room, but to Damien Chevalier's private office. It was a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of Manhattan. The space was sparse, dominated by a large mahogany desk and shelves filled with books, not awards. Damien was there, along with 2 of his top executives. On the large screen behind them was her business plan, dissected and analyzed. For the next 2 hours, they grilled her. They attacked her financial models, questioned her assumptions, and poked holes in her methodology. It wasn't hostile. It was a rigorous, high-stakes, intellectual stress test. For every question, Eleanor had a calm, well-reasoned answer. She knew her plan, inside and out. She had lived it, breathed it for months. Finally, Damien leaned back in his chair, a look of deep contemplation on his face. "Your market entry strategy is aggressive. Your tech is unproven at scale. The capital required will be immense." Eleanor's heart sank. "But the logic is sound," she countered, her voice steady. "The logic," Damien said, leaning forward, "is flawless. It's the most brilliant proposal I've seen in a decade." He turned to his team. "We're not going to invest in this. We're going to acquire it." He turned back to Eleanor. "We'll set up a new subsidiary under the Chevalier Innovations umbrella. Nexus Logistics. We'll provide the capital, the engineers, the resources, but it needs a leader, someone who understands it from the ground up." He paused, his grey eyes locking on hers. "The job of CEO is yours, Ms. Hayes, if you want it." Eleanor felt the floor drop out from under her. CEO, a title she had never even dared to dream of. The woman who was working a volunteer gig just 2 days ago was now being offered the chance to lead a multi-million-dollar venture. All the years of being told she wasn't good enough, that her ideas were cute, that her place was in the background, they all dissolved in that moment. She took a deep breath, the air in the sterile, powerful office suddenly tasting sweet. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I want it." The transition from Eleanor Hayes, nonprofit administrator, to Eleanor Hayes, CEO of Nexus Logistics, was like being shot out of a cannon. The first 6 months were a blur of 18-hour days. Damien Chevalier gave her a long leash, but expected world-class results. He surrounded her with the best and brightest engineers, from MIT data scientists, poached from Google, and operations experts who had managed logistics for entire nations. At first, some of the old guard at Chevalier Innovations were skeptical. They saw a woman with no recent corporate experience being handed the reins of a high-stakes subsidiary. But Eleanor quickly earned their respect. She wasn't an armchair CEO. She was in the trenches, working alongside her team to refine the code, personally negotiating with shipping magnates in Hamburg and union leaders in Long Beach. Her Wharton education was finally unleashed, and it was a formidable weapon. She had an intuitive grasp of complex systems and a quiet, steely determination that inspired loyalty. Her relationship with Damien evolved beyond that of mentor and protege. They would often work late into the night, debating strategy over takeout containers of pad thai in her office. He was drawn to the fierce intellect behind her quiet demeanor. She was fascinated by his visionary mind and surprised by the dry wit that lay beneath his reserved exterior. He never once mentioned her past life or her divorce. He saw her only for who she was now, a brilliant and capable leader. Their connection was forged in the fires of creation. He saw her bring Nexus logistics from a 70-page document to a functioning, revenue-generating reality. She saw the man behind the myth, a person who carried the weight of a global empire, but could still get genuinely excited about a breakthrough in battery technology. The romance, when it came, felt as natural and inevitable as a sunrise. It began one evening after they had secured their first major contract with a global retail giant. The office was empty, the city lights twinkling below them. "You did it, Eleanor," Damien said, his voice soft. "You actually built it." "We built it," she corrected him, a tired but triumphant smile on her face. He stepped closer, his gaze searching her face. "I haven't felt this invigorated by a project by a person in a very long time." He reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her forehead. The simple gesture was electric. In that moment, the corporate titan and the CEO vanished, and they were just a man and a woman standing at the summit of something they had built together. He leaned in and kissed her a kiss that was not about power or possession, but about a profound and mutual respect that had deepened into affection. Meanwhile, across town, the life of Marcus and Tiffany Thorne was beginning to lose its Instagram filter gloss. Marcus had secured a vice presidency at Sterling and Pierce after their marriage, but the promotion felt hollow. He was living beyond his means, trying to fund Tiffany's insatiable appetite for couture, exotic travel, and social relevance. Their Brooklyn brownstone was gone, traded for a soulless glass condominium in Tribeca that was mortgaged to the hilt. Tiffany was growing bored. The thrill of being a corporate wife was wearing off. The dinner parties were stuffy, and Marcus was increasingly stressed, his charm fraying at the edges. He would come home late, smelling of expensive whiskey and desperation, muttering about market volatility and deals that had fallen through. Their social media feeds still portrayed a fantasy life, smiling selfies from a yacht in Monaco, artfully arranged brunch spreads, glamorous shots at charity balls. But behind the scenes, the foundation was cracking. Marcus was making riskier and riskier trades at the firm, trying to land a massive bonus to keep their lifestyle afloat. He was a gambler, pretending to be an investor, and his luck was running thin. He occasionally thought of Eleanor, but only with a smug sense of satisfaction. He pictured her in her sad little apartment, probably still working some menial job, a testament to his good judgment in upgrading. He had no idea what was happening just a few dozen blocks away. Eleanor's ascent was meteoric, but deliberately quiet. Damien, ever private, kept Nexus Logistics out of the splashy tech headlines. It operated in a stealth mode, building its client base and refining its technology. Eleanor preferred it that way. She wasn't interested in fame. She was interested in success. Her life had transformed. Her queen's apartment was replaced by a beautiful light-filled penthouse at the top of the Chevalier Innovations building, a personal gift from Damien. She wore bespoke power suits not because she had to, but because they felt like armor she had earned. She traveled the world not as a tourist, but as a commander of industry. She never looked up Marcus. She didn't have to. She was building a world so large that he no longer occupied any space within it. The engagement was as private and profound as their relationship. They were in Lake Como at a secluded villa owned by Damien. There was no grand gesture, no photographer hiding in the bushes. As they watched the sunset over the water, he simply turned to her, took her hand, and slipped a ring on her finger. It wasn't a gaudy diamond the size of a knuckle. It was an elegant, flawless sapphire, the color of the deep sea, flanked by two understated diamonds. "Your eyes were the first thing I noticed," he said. "Not their color, but the intelligence in them. The fire. This reminded me of that." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of an overwhelming, bone-deep happiness she never thought she would feel again. This love wasn't about status or appearances. It was about being seen, truly seen, for exactly who she was. They decided to announce the engagement, and Eleanor's role at Nexus Logistics at the same time through a single, powerful press release. They knew it would send shockwaves through the financial and tech worlds. Eleanor felt a slight tremor of apprehension, knowing the news would inevitably reach Marcus, but it was a distant concern, like a storm cloud on a far-off horizon. Her focus was on the future, a future that was brighter than she could have ever imagined. The view from the summit was breathtaking. The news broke on a Wednesday morning. It wasn't a gossip column tidbit. It was a front-page story in the Wall Street Journal and the lead item on Bloomberg terminal screens worldwide. Enigmatic tech billionaire Damien Chevalier to wed Eleanor Hayes. Hayes revealed as CEO of secretive multi-billion-dollar subsidiary Nexus Logistics. The article was accompanied by a single approved photograph. It showed Eleanor and Damien not at a gala, but at a bustling port, both wearing hard hats and looking at a shipping container, a shared look of intense focus and partnership on their faces. Eleanor looked powerful, confident, and utterly in command. The shockwave hit Marcus Thorne like a physical impact. He was in his glass-walled office at Sterling & Pierce, barking at a junior analyst when his screen flashed with the Bloomberg alert. He clicked on it, his irritation turning to confusion and then to stunned, sickening disbelief. Eleanor Hayes. It had to be a different Eleanor Hayes. His Eleanor Hayes was organizing charity events and living in obscurity. He read the name again. Formerly Eleanor Thorne. The air left his lungs. He stared at the picture. The woman in the hard hat was his ex-wife, but she was also a complete stranger. The quiet, accommodating woman he had cast aside was gone. In her place was a titan standing shoulder to shoulder with one of the most powerful men on the planet. CEO. CEO. He remembered her cute little academic exercise and felt a cold dread creep up his spine. His phone began to buzz incessantly. Texts from colleagues. Emails with the subject line, "A call from Robert Ackman." He ignored them all. He clicked through to the full article. It detailed the incredible, under-the-radar success of Nexus Logistics, calling its AI platform the most significant disruption to global trade in 50 years. It valued the subsidiary in the low 10 figures, billion-dollar valuation, and Eleanor, his Eleanor, was the CEO. The words, "a real upgrade," echoed in his mind, but now they sounded like a fool's boast. Tiffany, with her vapid chatter and endless spending, suddenly seemed like a childish liability. Eleanor was running a $1 billion company. The sedan he'd traded in had apparently been a stealth bomber all along. The dread curdled into a furious, venomous jealousy. How had she done this? It had to be Chevalier. He'd plucked her from obscurity, given her this title, this life. She couldn't have earned it. The narrative was comforting, but a deeper, more terrifying thought wormed its way into his mind. What if she had? The second shockwave hit an hour later in a board meeting. The firm's quarterly performance was dismal. Marcus's high-risk bets had backfired spectacularly, leading to significant losses in his division. Mr. Sterling Tiffany's father and the firm's senior partner was not pleased. "We need a lifeline, Marcus," Sterling said, his voice cold. "A big win. Our institutional clients are getting nervous." Another partner, a man named George, cleared his throat. "There's Chevalier Innovations," he said, looking at the tablet in front of him. "Their new logistics arm, Nexus, is completely reshaping the market. Any company that gets in on the ground floor of their ecosystem will be set for the next decade. We need an introduction, a meeting." All eyes in the room turned to Marcus. His connection to Eleanor, once a source of private shame he'd spun into a story of his own upward mobility, was now their only potential asset. "Marcus," Mr. Sterling said, his tone leaving no room for argument, "your ex-wife is running the company. You were married for over a decade. You will call her. You will get us that meeting. This isn't a request." Marcus felt sweat bead on his forehead. Call Eleanor. What would he even say? "Hi, remember me? The guy who publicly humiliated you and called you obsolete? I'd like to beg for a business deal now." The humiliation was unbearable. That evening, the cracks in his own upgraded life became gaping chasms. Tiffany was in a fury, but not for the reasons he expected. "Everyone is talking about it," she shrieked, throwing her iPad onto their white leather sofa. "They're calling her the Cinderella CEO. Page 6 is doing a whole profile, and there are pictures of you with her from years ago. You look so happy." Her anger was tinged with a new and unfamiliar insecurity. She had built her identity on being the upgrade. Now, in the eyes of the world, she was the starter marriage for a man who had let a business genius slip through his fingers. "It's a fluke, Tiff," Marcus snapped, loosening his tie. "Chevalier is just propping her up. It's a vanity project." "$1 billion vanity project," Tiffany shot back, her voice sharp. "My father called. He said, your job depends on getting a meeting with her. Her, the woman you told me, was a nobody." Later that night, unable to sleep, Eleanor was in the library of her penthouse, looking through a box of old mementos she'd almost thrown away. She found a faded photograph from early in their marriage. They were both in their 20s, sitting on the steps of their first tiny apartment. She was holding up her business plan, the very one that had become Nexus, her face alight with excitement. He was looking at her, and the expression on his face, which she had once mistaken for loving indulgence, now looked chillingly different in the light of hindsight. It was condescension, a placating smile for a wife with a little hobby. And then she remembered. It wasn't just that he'd dismissed her idea, he had actively sabotaged it. He had accidentally spilled coffee on her printed proposal the day before she was meant to present it to a potential angel investor. He had told her she was too sensitive for the cutthroat world of startups, that her real talent was in supporting him. He had convinced her to turn down a promising job offer from a logistics firm, saying the long hours would ruin their social life. It hadn't been neglect. It had been a deliberate, systematic campaign to keep her small. to keep her in his shadow because he was terrified of her light. He hadn't just failed to see her potential, he had seen it, feared it, and tried to bury it. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. His cruelty at the gala hadn't just been arrogance. It was the triumphant kick of a man who thought he had successfully neutralized a threat. A cold, clear calm settled over Eleanor. This wasn't just about a failed marriage anymore. It was about a stolen dream. And now the man who had stolen it was going to have to come to her and ask for a piece of it. She closed the box and looked out at the city lights. The storm cloud on the horizon was getting closer, and she found that she wasn't afraid. She was ready. The email arrived a week later. It was from Marcus's assistant, a formal, stilted request for a meeting between Sterling and Pierce and the CEO of Nexus Logistics to discuss potential synergistic partnerships. Eleanor read it, a wry smile touching her lips. He couldn't even ask himself. She had her own assistant reply, confirming a time. Not at her office, but in the main corporate boardroom on the 80th floor of the Chevalier Innovations Tower. A neutral but undeniably powerful territory. She specified that the preliminary meeting would be with her and her COO only. She would not allow Damien to be present. This was her battle to fight. On the day of the meeting, Eleanor chose her outfit with the care of a general selecting armor. A sharp crimson dress that spoke of power and passion, paired with understated but obviously expensive jewelry. She looked every inch the formidable CEO she had become. She was reviewing quarterly projections with her COO, a sharp woman named Sarah, when Marcus and his father-in-law, Mr. Sterling, were ushered in. The change in Marcus was shocking. The swagger was gone, replaced by a pallid, nervous energy. His expensive suit seemed to hang off him, and he avoided her gaze, his eyes darting around the massive boardroom as if looking for an escape route. Mr. Sterling, on the other hand, was all brisk predatory focus. "Eleanor," Mr. Sterling began, extending a hand. "A pleasure to finally meet you. I'm Andrew Sterling. We've been following the success of Nexus with great admiration." "Andrew," Eleanor replied, her handshake firm, her tone polite but cool. She nodded once at Marcus. "Marcus?" Marcus flinched at the sound of his name from her lips. "Eleanor," he mumbled, finally, meeting her eyes. He saw the woman he knew, but refracted through a prism of power and success he couldn't comprehend. He felt a desperate, pathetic urge to apologize, to explain, but the words died in his throat. They sat. The vast, polished table stretched between them like a battlefield. Mr. Sterling launched into his pitch, a slick presentation about Sterling and Pierce's history, their client base, and how they could offer Nexus unparalleled access to capital markets for its next phase of expansion. Eleanor listened patiently, her face unreadable. She asked sharp, insightful questions about their risk management protocols and their recent quarterly losses, questions that showed she had done her homework, and that made Marcus visibly squirm. "Your firm's recent performance has been volatile," she noted calmly, looking directly at Marcus. "Your division in particular seems to be chasing high-risk, short-term gains. Nexus is built on a philosophy of long-term, sustainable growth. I'm not seeing the synergy." This was the opening Marcus had been coached to take. "That's precisely why we're here," he jumped in, his voice a little too loud. "My past strategies were for a different market. I see the future now, and it's what you've built. We want to be a part of it. I want to be a part of it. I've always believed in your vision, Elle." The lie was so audacious, so shameless, that Eleanor almost laughed. Always believed in her vision, the memory of him, condescendingly calling her business plan A cute little hobby flashed in her mind, hot and sharp. She leaned forward, her composure absolute. "Is that so, Marcus? That's not what I recall." She paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. "I recall you telling me I wasn't cut out for the business world, that I was too sensitive. I recall a very important proposal getting drenched in coffee the night before a big meeting. Do you remember that?" Marcus's face went white. Mr. Sterling shot him a sharp, questioning look. That was an accident," Marcus stammered. "Was it?" Eleanor's voice was still quiet, but it cut through the room like a shard of ice. "Was it also an accident when you convinced me to turn down the job at Pro Logistics, or when you told me for years that my only real value was in supporting your career?" She turned her gaze to a stunned Andrew Sterling. "The vision for Nexus isn't new, Andrew. I wrote the first draft of this business plan 12 years ago. Your son-in-law, my husband at the time, did everything in his power to ensure it never saw the light of day. He didn't believe in my vision. He was terrified of it." She looked back at Marcus, whose facade had completely crumbled. He looked small, pathetic, a man utterly exposed. "And 2 years ago," she continued, her voice dropping to an almost conversational tone, "at a charity gala, you introduced your fiancée to me. You called her a real upgrade. You said it loudly so I would hear. You wanted to make sure I understood that I had been discarded, that I was worthless." She stood up, walking to the vast window and looking down at the city below. "You see, Marcus, the difference between you and me is that you think value is something you acquire. A new wife, a bigger title, a riskier trade. You believe in upgrades. I believe in building something from the ground up, something real, something with integrity." She turned back to face them. "Nexus Logistics is my creation. It is built on a foundation of transparency, efficiency, and trust. Sterling and Pierce, under its current management, represents the exact opposite. Your firm is desperate, and your star trader here has a history of not just poor judgment, but of actively sabotaging potential for his own benefit." She looked at her COO. "Sarah, will you show our guests out?" She then fixed her gaze on Marcus one last time. "The meeting is over. There is no partnership. There will never be a partnership, not because of our past, Marcus, but because from a purely business standpoint, you and your firm are a bad investment." It was the ultimate checkmate, not a rejection based on personal revenge, but a cold, hard, professional verdict. She had judged him by the very metrics he worshipped: profit potential and value, and found him wanting. Marcus sat, frozen, completely undone. Mr. Sterling stood up, his face a mask of cold fury, not at Eleanor, but at the son-in-law, who had just cost him the deal of a lifetime, and revealed himself to be a fool. He walked out without another word, leaving Marcus to stumble out behind him, a ruined man, in the shadow of the empire his ex-wife had built. As the door clicked shut, Eleanor remained standing by the window. There was no elation, no thrill of victory, just a quiet, profound sense of release. The ghosts of the past had finally been laid to rest. She hadn't just gotten even, she had gotten free. The view of the city seemed clearer now, the future stretching out before her, bright and limitless. The fallout for Marcus was swift and brutal. Andrew Sterling, a man who valued strength and reputation above all else, could not tolerate the humiliation. Within a week, Marcus was fired from Sterling and Pierce, the official reason cited as irreconcilable strategic differences. The unofficial reason was whispered all over Wall Street. He had fumbled the most important meeting of his career and been exposed as a fraud by his brilliant ex-wife. His professional demise triggered a personal one. Tiffany, whose identity was inextricably linked to status and wealth, saw him now not as a provider of a glamorous life, but as a liability. His name was a punchline at the dinner parties she so desperately wanted to attend. The upgrade had been revealed as a lemon. She filed for divorce less than a month later, her lawyers fighting ruthlessly for every last asset in their already debt-ridden portfolio. Marcus was forced to sell the Tribeca condo and move into a rented apartment, a pale imitation of the life he once had. He was a man adrift, haunted by the specter of the woman he had underestimated and the empire he had inadvertently unleashed. For Eleanor, life moved in the opposite direction. The story of her confrontation with Marcus leaked, becoming a legend in business circles. She became an icon, not just a Cinderella CEO, but a symbol of resilience and earned success. She was invited to speak at global economic forums, her insights on sustainable growth treated as gospel. She and Damien became a true power couple, their partnership built on a foundation of intellectual respect and genuine love. One crisp autumn evening, several months after the meeting, Eleanor and Damien were walking through Central Park, hand in hand. The leaves were turning fiery shades of red and orange, mirroring the crimson of the dress she had worn on that fateful day. "I saw an article about him today," Damien said, quietly, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "He's trying to start his own consulting firm. It's not going well." Eleanor nodded, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. A year ago, news of Marcus's failure might have brought her a grim sense of satisfaction. Now it barely registered. It felt like reading about a stranger in a foreign newspaper. His downfall was not the source of her happiness. Her own achievements were. "My victory wasn't seeing him fall, Damien," she said, her voice clear and certain. "It was realizing that I could fly. The best thing he ever did for me was letting me go." She stopped walking and turned to face him, her eyes shining with an inner light that had nothing to do with wealth or status. "He thought I was a blueprint for a life that would serve him. He never realized I was the architect of my own." Damien smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his intelligent gray eyes. "And what are you architecting now, Ms. Hayes?" Eleanor's lips curved into a confident smile. She thought of Nexus Logistics, now expanding into Asia. She thought of the new charitable foundation she and Damien were starting to fund STEM education for underprivileged girls. She thought of the home they were building together, filled with books and laughter and shared ideas. "A new blueprint," she said. "One where the foundation is self-worth, the walls are built with integrity, and the view from every single window is the future." He leaned in and kissed her, a quiet affirmation under the canopy of autumn trees. She was no longer Eleanor Thorne, the starter wife, or even Eleanor Hayes, the CEO. She was simply Eleanor, a woman who had been underestimated, discarded, and had risen from the ashes not to seek revenge, but to build a world of her own on her own terms. And in that world, she was priceless. The grand ballroom of the New York Public Library was not filled with the usual stiff old money crowd. Tonight, there were no whispers of stock market conquests or Hamptons gossip. Instead, the cavernous space buzzed with a different kind of energy, the bright, crackling hum of potential. Tables were filled with eager high school students from all 5 boroughs, their eyes wide with wonder, mingling with university professors, Nobel laureates, and pioneering engineers. This was the inaugural gala for the Hayes Chevalier STEM Foundation, an organization dedicated to one simple mission: finding and funding overlooked brilliance. At the center of it all stood Eleanor. She wore a simple, elegant gown of deep sapphire blue, the same color as her engagement ring. As she moved through the room, she didn't just greet donors. She stopped to talk to a group of girls from the Bronx about their rocketry club project and listened intently as a young man from Queens explained his app for community gardens. This was not the performative charity of her past life. This was her passion project, the embodiment of her new blueprint. From across the room, Damien watched her, a look of profound admiration on his face. He saw not just his partner and the CEO of a billion-dollar company, but a force of nature who had turned her own painful past into a wellspring of opportunity for others. Later, Eleanor took the stage. A hush fell over the room. The last time she had stood at a podium in a room like this, she was a volunteer with a name tag, a ghost at the feast. Now, she was the host, the architect. "Good evening," she began, her voice calm and resonant. "Thank you all for being here. When we first conceived of this foundation, we weren't just thinking about funding scholarships or labs. We were thinking about a single destructive idea, the notion that some people are simply upgrades over others." A soft murmur went through the audience. "It's a concept our society is obsessed with," she continued. "The new model, the new software, the new employee. We're taught to discard the old for the new, to believe that value is something you can easily replace. But this logic is flawed. It presumes that potential is static. It fails to see the dormant power, the hidden engine inside something or someone that has been written off. True progress, the kind that changes the world, doesn't come from trading things in. It comes from investing in them. It comes from seeing a reliable sedan and having the vision to know that with the right fuel, the right driver, and the right road, it can outperform any sports car ever built. A real upgrade isn't about replacing something. It's about unlocking the incredible untapped value that was there all along. She spoke for 10 more minutes, her words weaving a powerful narrative of resilience, innovation, and belief. When she finished, the room erupted in a standing ovation. As she stepped down, ready to hand the stage over to the first scholarship recipient, a hand shot up from the front table. It was the young woman from the Bronx Rocketry Club, a firebrand named Maria. "Ms. Hayes." Maria said, her voice clear and challenging, though not disrespectful. "That's a great speech, but you and Mr. Chevalier live in a tower on top of the world. How do you make sure this foundation is more than just a check? How do we know you're not just trying to upgrade your own public image?" The room went silent. It was a direct, piercing question. Security started to move toward the girl, but Eleanor held up a hand, stopping them. She walked to the edge of the stage and looked directly at Maria, a genuine smile on her face. "Thank you, Maria," she said warmly. "That is the most important question anyone could ask tonight. And you deserve an honest answer." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "You're right. I do live in a tower now. But for a very long time, I lived in a small room with a view of a brick wall. A place where my ideas were called cute and my ambitions were seen as a threat. I know what it feels like to have a blueprint for something magnificent trapped inside you with no one willing to give you the tools to build it. I know what it is to be written off." Her voice became softer, more personal. "This foundation isn't about me. It's about that brick wall. Our goal is to tear down every brick wall that stands between a brilliant mind, like yours, and the future you deserve to build." The checks are just the hammers. The real work is done by you. Our promise isn't to upgrade you. It's to get out of your way and give you the tools, the mentorship, and the unwavering belief you need to launch your rocket clear into the stratosphere. Maria's skeptical expression softened, replaced by a slow, dawning smile of understanding. The audience broke into another, even more thunderous round of applause. As Eleanor finally walked away from the stage, she felt a light touch on her arm. It was Anne Ackman, Robert Ackman's wife, a woman who had stood by and watched silently as Marcus had humiliated Eleanor years ago. Eleanor, Anne gushed, her face a mixture of awe and sycophantic regret. That was just incredible, simply breathtaking. Robert and I, we often talk about that awful night at the Pierre. We had no idea. He feels just terrible about how Marcus behaved. Eleanor looked at the woman who was now so desperate for her approval. There was no anger, no resentment. There was only a quiet sense of distance. "Thank you, Anne," she said politely, her tone pleasant but final. "I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening." She gave a slight nod and walked away, leaving Anne Ackman standing in her wake. She had nothing left to prove to her or to any of them. Later that night, back in the quiet serenity of their penthouse, she and Damien looked at a photo from the event on his tablet. It wasn't of them. It was a picture of Maria standing with a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, her face illuminated with fierce joy and boundless possibility. "That," Eleanor said, softly pointing to the image, "is the best acquisition we will ever make." Damien wrapped his arm around her. "The architect has drawn a beautiful new world, Eleanor." She leaned her head on his shoulder, gazing at the photo that represented a future she was now actively creating. The echoes of a slammed door and a cruel insult were gone, replaced by the sound of construction, of new futures being built, of potential being gloriously finally unlocked. So what is the ultimate upgrade? Is it a younger partner, a bigger house, a more prestigious job title, or is it the quiet, unshakable confidence that comes from building a life on your own terms? Eleanor's story shows us that the most powerful revenge is not seeing someone else fail, but creating a reality for yourself that is so successful and so fulfilling that their opinion becomes utterly irrelevant. Her ex-husband tried to define her worth, but in the end, she was the one who set the price. And it was a price he could never afford to pay. If this story of resilience and ultimate triumph resonated with you, please hit that like button to let us know. Don't forget to share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own power. And for more stories of incredible transformations and sweet, sweet karma, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next.
The click of Victoria's heels on the polished marble floor was a sound of pure triumph, or so Marcus Thorne believed. He was leading her into the grand lobby of the Argento Grand, the city's most exclusive hotel, a palace of hushed luxury and old money. On her finger, a diamond flashed under the crystal chandeliers, a stone so large it was practically vulgar, a diamond designed to be a weapon. His plan was simple: a weekend of opulent indulgence, a few carefully placed calls, and the news would surely get back to his ex-wife. He was here to flaunt his victory, not knowing that the ghost he thought he'd buried long ago didn't just haunt these halls. She owned them. Marcus Thorne breathed in the air of the Argento Grand and found it to be the scent of his own success. It was a carefully curated fragrance, a blend of white lilies, expensive leather, and something else, something clean and sharp, like freshly printed money. He squeezed his fiancée's hand, drawing her closer. "Look at this place, Victoria," he murmured, his voice a low thrum of satisfaction. "This is it. The top. Only the best for you, my love. Victoria Carrington, whose blonde hair was coiled into a perfect chignon, offered him a dazzling smile. Her eyes, however, were busy cataloguing everything: the soaring vaulted ceilings, painted with silver leaf frescoes, the ridiculously oversized fireplace, crackling merrily, despite the mild weather, the quiet efficiency of the bellhops who moved with the grace of dancers. "It's breathtaking, Marcus," she said, her voice a polished, finishing school purr. She held up her left hand, ostensibly to admire a modernist sculpture, but really to let the light catch the 7-carat diamond on her finger. The ring was the exclamation point on the statement of his life, a statement that read, "I have won." They approached the front desk, a monolithic structure of dark-veined marble. A man with silvering hair and a perfectly tailored suit gave them a polite, reserved smile. His name tag read, Alistair Finch, Hotel Manager. Marcus didn't smile back. He cultivated an air of slight impatience. It was a power move he'd learned in the boardroom. Reservation for Thorne, presidential suite. He let the words hang in the air, weighty and important. Mr. Finch's fingers danced over a keyboard, his expression unchanging. "Of course, Mr. Thorne. Welcome to the Argento Grand. We have you in our signature presidential suite, the Olympus." He slid a leather-bound folio across the counter for a signature. "I trust your stay will be exceptional." "It had better be," Marcus said, scrawling his name with a flourish. He looked around the lobby again, a sneer playing on his lips. "I nearly booked a suite at the Chamberlain. They say the service there is impeccable." It was a lie, of course. He'd chosen the Argento Grand for a very specific reason. It was the new pinnacle of luxury in the city, the place everyone who was anyone talked about. It was the kind of place she would hear about. His ex-wife, Serafina. The thought of her name was like a sour taste in his mouth. Serafina with her paint-stained fingers and her head in the clouds. Serafina who had believed that artistic integrity could pay the bills. When he'd left her 5 years ago, she was working out of a dusty, cramped studio, selling the occasional painting for just enough to cover her rent. He had told her in no uncertain terms that she was a dreamer, a child, and that he needed a partner, not a project. He'd needed someone like Victoria, polished, connected, and appreciative of the finer things that only serious money could buy. "Is the rooftop bar open this evening?" Finch, Marcus asked, already dismissing the man as he pocketed his pen. "The Starlight Terrace is indeed, sir. It offers an unparalleled view of the city skyline." "Mr." Finch replied, his tone impeccably neutral. "Good. I want a prime table reserved for 9 o'clock. We'll be celebrating our engagement," Marcus declared loud enough for the couple checking in beside them to hear. He draped an arm around Victoria, who performed her role perfectly, leaning into him with a besotted sigh. "And another thing, I hear the owner of this establishment is quite the visionary, a real force of nature." Mr. Finch's eyes flickered with something interest, perhaps. "Our owner values their privacy, but they are most certainly the soul of the Argento Grand." I'm sure Marcus scoffed. "I'm closing a merger next month that will reshape the tech logistics sector on the West Coast. I think this visionary, and I might have a lot to talk about. See if you can arrange a meeting, a brief one. I'd like to offer my congratulations on the hotel, and perhaps some advice." He imagined the scene. Him magnanimous and powerful, dispensing wisdom to some faceless hotelier, a story he could later embellish for his colleagues. Victoria tugged at his arm. "Marcus, darling, let's go up to the room. I want to see the view." "Of course, my love." He gave Mr. Finch a final dismissive nod. "Have our bags sent up immediately. And don't forget about that table. Or the meeting." As they were escorted to the private elevator by a silent bellhop, Marcus felt a surge of pure, unadulterated glee. Everything was falling into place. He pictured Serafina, probably still in some miserable little apartment, hearing through the grapevine that he was staying at the Argento Grand with his beautiful, wealthy fiancée. He hoped the news would sting. He hoped it would remind her of everything she'd given up everything she could never have. The thought was more satisfying than any multi-million-dollar deal. He stepped into the elevator, pulling Victoria in for a kiss. To us, he whispered against her lips, to our future. But as the elevator doors slid silently shut, he failed to see the look on Mr. Finch's face. The polite mask had fallen away, replaced by a look of profound, icy contemplation. He picked up the phone at his desk, dialing a private internal number. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and firm, "you're not going to believe who just checked into the Olympus suite." High above the city, in a sprawling penthouse that occupied the entire top floor of the Argento Grand Serafina Monroe, was sketching. The room was not what one might expect of a hotel owner. There were no gilded frames or ostentatious displays of wealth. Instead, it was a sanctuary of creativity and calm. One wall was a floor-to-ceiling window, offering a god's-eye view of the metropolis. The other walls were covered in architectural blueprints, fabric swatches, and charcoal drawings of future projects. The air smelled of graphite paper and the faint, clean scent of rain from a brief afternoon shower. Serafina was not the woman Marcus remembered. The 5 years that had been a triumphant climb for him had been a quiet, relentless period of creation for her. Her hair, once a wild mane of dark curls, she was always tucking behind her ear, was now styled in a sleek, chin-length bob that framed a face that had gained a new sharp clarity. The uncertainty in her eyes had been replaced by a placid confidence. She wore simple, elegant black trousers and a silk blouse, no paint stains in sight. Her private line buzzed a soft, unobtrusive chime. She knew it was Alistair. No one else had the number. She put down her charcoal pencil and picked up the receiver. "Alistair, is there a problem, ma'am?" His voice was steady, but she could detect the underlying tension. She had worked with him for years, from the moment this building was nothing but a derelict, forgotten relic she'd purchased with the last of her inheritance. He was more than a manager. He was her confidant. "You're not going to believe who just checked into the Olympus suite." A cold knot formed in Serafina's stomach. The Olympus suite was her masterpiece, the jewel in the crown of her hotel, reserved for only the most distinguished guests. "Who is it? Alistair Marcus Thorne?" The name hit her with the force of a physical blow. For a single, dizzying moment, she was no longer the owner of a multi-million-dollar empire. She was 28 again, standing in the middle of their empty apartment, the echo of his final words ringing in her ears. "A dreamer, Serafina. That's all you'll ever be. You sit here with your little drawings and your fantasies while the real world passes you by. I need a woman who can stand beside me, not one I have to carry. You will never ever amount to anything." She had cried for weeks. Then she had gotten angry. And then she had gotten to work. The inheritance from her grandmother, which she had been saving to open a small gallery, was suddenly not enough. She had wanted to build something so solid, so real, so undeniably successful, that it would permanently silence the voice of his doubt in her head. She'd found this building a historical landmark on the verge of being condemned, and saw not ruin, but potential. She'd poured every cent, every ounce of her energy, every sleepless night into its revival. She designed everything herself, from the sweeping curve of the lobby staircase to the custom-forged silver cutlery in the restaurant. Her little drawings became blueprints. Her fantasies became fabric selections and lighting schematics. The Argento Grand wasn't just a hotel. It was the physical manifestation of her soul, a monument to the ambition he never believed she possessed. And now he was here, in her house. She took a slow, deliberate breath, steadying herself. The old pain was a dull ache, a phantom limb, but the new strength was far more potent. "Is he alone?" she asked, her voice betraying no emotion. "No, ma'am. He's with his fiancée, a Miss Victoria Carrington. He made quite a show of her engagement ring in the lobby." There was a pause. "He also requested a prime table at the Starlight Terrace to celebrate." And he's requested a meeting with the owner. He wishes to offer his congratulations, and I believe his words were some advice. A dry, mirthless laugh escaped Serafina's lips. Of course, the sheer, unmitigated arrogance of the man. It was almost impressive. He hadn't changed at all. He still saw the world as a ladder, and anyone he met was either above him, to be envied, or below him to be patronized. And what did you tell him? Alistair, I informed him that the owner values their privacy, but that I would pass along the request. Good. She walked over to the vast window, looking down at the city lights beginning to twinkle to life. It was a kingdom, and it was hers. He was down there somewhere, a guest in her castle, swaggering through halls she had designed, sleeping on sheets she had chosen, believing he was the king. An idea began to form in her mind, sharp and clear as cut glass. For years she had imagined this moment. In some fantasies, she was screaming at him, listing her accomplishments. In others, she simply ignored him, denying him the satisfaction of a reaction. But now, with him actually here, a different path presented itself. It was a path of exquisite poetic justice. He hadn't come here seeking her out. He had come here seeking a symbol of success, and had stumbled blindly into her truth. She would not hide. She would not scream. She would simply be. Alistair. She said, her voice now cool and decisive. I want you to give Mr. Thorne exactly what he wants. Everything. The best table at the Starlight Terrace. Give it to him. The finest champagne we have on the house. I want his every whim catered to. I want him to feel like the king of the world. Ma'am Alistair sounded confused, and about his meeting with the owner, Serafina continued, a slow smile spreading across her face. Tell him the owner is intrigued. Tell him the owner would be delighted. Arrange a private dinner for him and his fiancée tomorrow evening, in the solarium. We'll have Chef Genevieve prepare her signature tasting menu. The solarium was her private dining room, a glass-enclosed space next to her penthouse with a breathtaking view of the stars. It was not available to the public. No amount of money could book it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Alistair spoke, a note of dawning understanding and deep admiration in his voice. Consider it done, ma'am. And for what time shall I inform him the owner will be joining them? Serafina looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the window. The woman looking back was calm, powerful, and in complete control. Tell him, she said softly, that the owner will arrive for dessert. The first 24 hours at the Argento Grand were for Marcus an exercise in supreme validation. Mr. Finch had called their suite personally to inform them that their table at the Starlight Terrace was secured, and that the owner, while reclusive, was deeply impressed by Mr. Thorne's profile, and had requested the honor of hosting them for a private dinner the following evening. Marcus had puffed out his chest. You see, Victoria, this is how the world works when you're at the top. They know who I am. That evening, at the rooftop bar, Marcus held court. The champagne, a vintage he recognized as obscenely expensive, arrived compliments of the management. He made sure the server announced it loudly. He regaled Victoria with a booming narrative of his latest corporate conquest, peppering it with names of CEOs and investment bankers. He gestured expansively, his hands moving through the air, ensuring that the light from the city below would catch the facets of Victoria's diamond and scatter them across the nearby tables. Victoria played her part, smiling and nodding, but a strange unease was beginning to settle over her. She had been with Marcus for a year, drawn to his ambition and the dazzling world he inhabited. But here, in the rarefied air of the Argento Grand, his ambition seemed less like a driving force and more like a desperate hunger. He wasn't just enjoying his success, he was brandishing it like a weapon against an unseen enemy. She also noticed the staff. They were attentive, yes, but in a way she couldn't quite decipher. Their politeness was flawless, yet there was a watchfulness in their eyes, a shared silent understanding that she wasn't privy to. When Marcus snapped his fingers at a passing waitress for another bottle of champagne, the waitress smiled, said, "Of course, sir," but exchanged a fleeting, knowing glance with the bartender. It was so quick, Victoria almost missed it. The next day, they availed themselves of the hotel's spa. While Marcus was getting a massage, Victoria wandered through the hotel's art gallery. Unlike the ostentatious lobby, the gallery was a quiet, intimate space. The collection was eclectic, bold abstracts, delicate watercolors, and a series of striking charcoal sketches of the city's architecture. She was particularly drawn to a series of 3 small framed drawings near the entrance. They were preliminary sketches for a building showing the evolution of a grand sweeping staircase. The design was fluid, elegant, and instantly recognizable. It was the staircase in the lobby. Beneath the sketches was a small silver plaque. It read, "Lobby Staircase Preliminary Studies, S. Monroe." "Beautiful, aren't they?" Victoria turned. A woman in a chef's uniform, her name tag reading Genevieve Dubois, was standing beside her, also looking at the sketches. "They're incredible," Victoria said honestly. "This S. Monroe must be a genius." Chef Dubois smiled a warm, genuine expression that was a stark contrast to the strained politeness of the other staff. "She is more than that. She is the heart of this place. She did not just buy this hotel, she breathed life back into it. Every detail you see, from the pattern on the carpets to the forks you eat with, passed through her hands. She saved this building, and in doing so, she gave jobs to hundreds of us." The chef's voice was thick with a fierce, unwavering loyalty. "She believed in this place when no one else did." "She sounds amazing," Victoria said. A pang of something she couldn't name, envy, perhaps, or admiration stirring within her. The owner, Marcus, was so eager to advise, was an artist, a creator. Later, as she was getting ready for their private dinner, Victoria felt the weight of the ring on her finger. It had always felt like a symbol of her future of security and status. Now it felt heavy, like a gilded cage. She watched Marcus knot his tie in the mirror. He was practicing his owner's meeting speech under his breath. "And so while your aesthetic is commendable from a pure ROI perspective, you should have considered—" "Marcus," she interrupted softly, "don't you think you should just be gracious? This person is hosting us in their private dining room." He turned, frowning. "Victoria, this is how deals are done. You establish yourself as an equal, or better yet, as a mentor. It's about respect. This owner will respect my insight." But Victoria wasn't so sure. She thought of the sketches of the chef's reverent tone. The owner of the Argento Grand didn't seem like someone who needed Marcus Thorne's advice on how to be successful. They were escorted up to the solarium by Mr. Finch himself. It was a stunning space, an atrium of glass and silver steel arching over a single beautifully set table. The city glittered below them like a carpet of fallen stars. It was the most romantic setting she had ever seen. Marcus, however, saw it as a stage. He strode in, surveying the room as if he were considering a purchase. "Impressive," he conceded. "Very impressive. A bit over the top, perhaps, but it makes a statement." The meal was a symphony of flavors, each course more exquisite than the last. But Marcus barely tasted it. He was distracted constantly, checking his watch, rehearsing his lines in a low murmur. He ate his food with the perfunctory air of a man fueling up for a battle. Victoria felt a growing sense of dread. The perfection of the evening, the quiet dignity of the hotel, the story of its artist-creator. It was all coalescing into a narrative, and she was beginning to fear that she and Marcus were on the wrong side of it. Finally, the main courses were cleared. Mr. Finch entered the room. "Mr. Thorne, Miss Carrington, I hope the meal has been to your satisfaction." "It's been adequate," Marcus said dismissively. "When can we expect the owner?" "We're on a tight schedule." Mr. Finch's expression remained placid, but his eyes held a glint of something that might have been amusement. The owner will be with you momentarily. They are just concluding a call. He gestured towards the single door at the far end of the solarium. They will be entering from their private residence. Marcus straightened his tie and took a preparatory sip of wine. He gave Victoria a confident wink. "Showtime," he whispered. Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs. She stared at the door, her hands clenched in her lap. The diamond on her finger felt cold as ice. She had a terrible sinking feeling that the show was not going to be the one Marcus had been rehearsing for. The door opened, and the ghost from Marcus's past walked in. The woman who entered was not what Marcus expected. He had envisioned some portly aging tycoon in an ill-fitting suit, or perhaps a severe-looking heiress, dripping with ancestral jewels. He had certainly not expected a woman, his own age, dressed in a simple but exquisitely cut navy blue dress, who moved with an effortless grace that made the opulent room seem like her natural habitat. She closed the door softly behind her and paused, her gaze sweeping over the scene. The table, the view, the two guests. Her eyes were dark and intelligent, and for a fleeting second, Marcus felt a bizarre jolt of familiarity. He dismissed it instantly. He didn't move in circles that included women, like this woman who radiated a quiet power that didn't need to be announced. He stood up, extending a hand, his corporate smile firmly in place. "Mr. Thorne," he boomed. "Marcus Thorne, a pleasure to finally meet you. This is my fiancée, Victoria Carrington." The woman's eyes moved from him to Victoria. She gave Victoria a small, almost imperceptible nod, a flicker of acknowledgement woman to woman, before her gaze settled back on Marcus. She did not take his outstretched hand. "Hello, Marcus," she said. Her voice was calm, low, and utterly familiar. The corporate smile on Marcus's face froze, then cracked. The blood drained from his face, leaving behind a sickly, mottled pallor. His brain struggled to connect the dots, to reconcile the woman standing before him with the memory he held in his mind. The memory was of a girl with paint on her jeans, her brow furrowed in concentration over a canvas. This woman was impossible. Serafina. The name came out as a strangled whisper. It was a question, an accusation, and a prayer that he was wrong all in one. She smiled then, a slow, sad, knowing smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's been a long time." The world tilted on its axis. The solarium, the Argento Grande, the entire city, glittering below it all, snapped into a horrifying new focus. The initials on the sketches in the gallery S. Monroe, the staff's watchful, knowing eyes, Alistair Finch's unnerving composure, the reclusive owner who was impressed by his profile. It had all been a game, a trap, and he had walked into it preening and posturing like a fool. "You—" he stammered, his hand falling limply to his side. "This is your hotel?" "I prefer to think of it as a large-scale art installation," Serafina replied, her tone light, almost conversational. She walked gracefully over to the table, but did not sit. She remained standing, a silent position of power. "But yes, every last brick and silver spoon." Victoria sat frozen, her wineglass clutched in her hand. She stared from Marcus's slack-jawed, horrified face to Serafina's calm, composed one. This was the ex-wife, the dreamer, the woman who would never amount to anything. Victoria felt a wave of vertigo. The entire weekend, every boastful word Marcus had uttered, every condescending gesture, replayed in her mind, now cast in the humiliating glow of this revelation. Marcus finally found his voice, a rasp of disbelief and rage. "How you had nothing? You were nobody." "That's what you thought," Serafina said, her voice still quiet, yet it cut through the air like a razor. "You saw my drawings as a hobby. You saw my passion as a distraction. You never once thought to look at it as ambition. You left me with nothing, Marcus. You were right about that. And in nothing I found everything. I found focus. I found that the only voice I needed to listen to was my own. She looked at Victoria, whose face was pale with shock. He told you about me, I assume? The failed artist, the dead weight he had to cut loose to be successful. Victoria could only nod, her throat tight. Serafina's gaze returned to Marcus. You came here to flaunt your success, didn't you? You chose the most expensive, most talked about hotel in the city to rub my nose in what you thought I'd lost. A wry, painful flicker of amusement crossed her face. The irony is almost poetic. You came to my house to tell me you were king without ever realizing I owned the throne. Humiliation warred with fury on Marcus's face. He was a cornered animal, and he did the only thing he knew how to do. He lashed out. So, this is what this is all about. Revenge, he sneered, his voice regaining some of its bluster. You built all of this just to get back at me. How pathetic. How small. Serafina finally laughed, and the sound was not mirthless this time. It was genuine liberating and utterly dismissive of him. Oh, Marcus, she said, shaking her head slowly. You still don't get it, do you? You still think the world revolves around you. I didn't build this for you. I forgot about you years ago. I built this for me. I built it because it's what I was born to do. You were just a bad chapter in my story, not the main character. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Your problem, Marcus, is that you measure success in dollars and acquisitions. You think this ring. She glanced at the gaudy diamond on Victoria's hand. Makes you a man of substance. But true substance, true success, is building something from nothing. It's creating beauty. It's earning the loyalty of people like Chef Dubois and Mr. Finch. It's something you will never, ever understand. She straightened up, her tour de force complete. The evening is over. Your reservation at this hotel has been cancelled. Mr. Finch will have your bags waiting for you at the service entrance. We have, of course, comped your entire stay. Consider it a parting gift. Marcus stood there, trembling with a rage that had no outlet. He had been stripped bare, his arrogance and pride flayed from him in this glass cage in the sky. He looked at Victoria, expecting her to stand to defend him, to be his partner. But Victoria was looking at Serafina. She saw not a scorned ex-wife, but a powerhouse, an artist, a creator, a woman who had built an empire, not out of spite, but out of a strength Marcus had tried and failed to extinguish. Then Victoria did something that shocked them both. Slowly, deliberately, she slipped the 7-carat diamond ring off her finger. The stone that had felt like a trophy now felt like a shackle. She placed it on the table with a soft, definitive click. It sat there between them, a glittering monument to a future that had just evaporated. I think, Victoria said, her voice shaking but clear, I've been measuring success all wrong too. The click of the diamond on the white linen tablecloth was the loudest sound Marcus had ever heard. It was the sound of his perfectly constructed world shattering into a million pieces. He stared at the ring, then at Victoria's face. Her expression was not angry. It was one of profound, dawning clarity, and that was infinitely worse. Victoria, what are you doing? He hissed, his voice a frantic whisper. Put that back on. Don't let her do this to us. Victoria finally looked at him, and for the first time she saw him not as the powerful tycoon he projected, but as a small, insecure man, terrified of being seen as anything less than number one. She saw the cruelty he'd shown the staff, the desperate need for validation, the way he had just tried to belittle the incredible woman standing before them. And she felt nothing but a cold, deep shame for having been a part of it. She didn't do anything to us. Marcus, Victoria said, her voice gaining strength. She just held up a mirror. I don't like what I see. She pushed her chair back and stood up, her movements graceful and resolute. She looked at Serafina. Your hotel is magnificent. You are an inspiration. Serafina gave her a brief, compassionate nod. Be well, Victoria. With that, Victoria turned and walked towards the door, not looking back. She didn't run. She walked with the dignity of someone who had just been set free. Marcus was left alone at the table, a man dethroned in his own fantasy. He looked from the abandoned ring to Serafina, who watched him with an expression devoid of triumph. There was no gloating, no smug satisfaction. There was only a quiet finality, as if she were closing a book she had finished reading long ago. His humiliation curdled into a desperate, pathetic rage. "You think you've won," he snarled. "I'll ruin you. I have connections. I'll see to it that this place is audited into the ground. I'll spread rumors. By the time I'm done, no one will want to set foot in this monument to your ego." Serafina didn't even flinch. "You can try," she said calmly. "But my work, my reputation, and my balance sheets speak for themselves. Yours, on the other hand, are built on bluster and intimidation. Go ahead, Marcus. Make your calls. Let's see who the world believes the man screaming threats in a hotel he's just been thrown out of, or the woman who built it." She turned to leave. "Mr. Finch is waiting for you by the elevators, Marcus. I suggest you don't make a scene on your way out. My staff has been very patient with you, but that patience has its limits." She walked through the door to her private residence, closing it softly behind her, leaving Marcus alone in the glittering, silent solarium. He was surrounded by a level of success he could never hope to achieve, a success built on principles he couldn't comprehend. Creativity, passion, integrity. He looked at the ring on the table, the symbol of his supposed victory, now just a cold, meaningless piece of carbon. His descent was swift and ignominious. Mr. Finch was indeed waiting by the elevator, his expression as impassive as stone. There was no conversation. The ride down was silent, the air thick with Marcus's shame. He was not led through the grand lobby, where he had made his triumphant entrance less than 2 days before. He was guided through a series of service corridors, past laundry carts and kitchen staff, who pointedly ignored him, their silence a more damning judgment than any insult. His luggage was waiting by a grey, unmarked service door that opened into a dark, narrow alley. The scent of lilies and leather was gone, replaced by the smell of dumpsters and city grime. A taxi, presumably summoned by Mr. Finch, was idling at the curb. Marcus stepped out into the alley, the door clicking shut behind him. He stood there for a moment, the chilly night air a slap in the face. He had arrived believing he was on top of the world. He was leaving through the back door, stripped of his fiancée, his pride and the carefully crafted illusion of his own importance. His plan to flaunt his victory had backfired in the most spectacular way imaginable. He hadn't just lost a battle, he had been comprehensively, utterly, and quietly defeated by a ghost he thought he had vanquished years ago. He got into the taxi, a hollowed-out man, and disappeared into the night. Upstairs, Serafina stood at the window of her penthouse, looking not down at the alley, but out at the horizon. She did not feel a rush of victory. She felt quiet. The confrontation had been a storm she needed to weather, a final piece of old business that needed to be concluded. It wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation. She had reclaimed her own narrative from the man who had tried to write it for her. The faint ache of the past was finally gone, replaced by the peaceful, steady thrum of her own creation surrounding her. The Argento Grande was her fortress, her masterpiece, her home. And from this night on, it would no longer hold any ghosts. 2 weeks later, the story of Marcus Thorne's spectacular implosion had become a quiet legend among the staff of the Argento Grande. They spoke of it in hushed, respectful tones in the staff canteen, the tale of the arrogant ex-husband who unknowingly walked into the lioness's den. Their loyalty to Serafina, already rock solid, had been forged into something unbreakable. They were the guardians of her castle, and they had seen their queen vanquish a dragon. Marcus Thorne, for his part, had faded from the headlines he so desperately courted. The big merger he had been boasting about went through, but whispers began to circulate in his corporate circle about his sudden messy breakup and his erratic behavior. People who once flocked to his side at cocktail parties now gave him a wide berth. His power had always been perception, and the perception had been irrevocably damaged. He was still a wealthy man, but the sheen was gone, revealing the dull metal underneath. Serafina never heard from him again. She didn't expect to. She was too busy moving forward. One crisp autumn afternoon, she was in her studio, not the grand penthouse, but a smaller, light-filled workshop on the hotel's 5th floor, where she still did her most intimate design work. She was working on the plans for her next project, a foundation to provide grants and studio space for young emerging artists, the kind of artists she had once been full of talent but lacking resources. Alistair Finch knocked softly and entered holding a small flat package wrapped in simple brown paper. "This was delivered by courier for you, ma'am," he said. "There's no return address, but the card says it's from a Victoria Carrington." Serafina felt a flicker of surprise. She took the package and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was not a letter but a book, a beautiful leather-bound volume on the history of architectural design. Tucked inside the front cover was a simple, elegant note card. She opened it. The note was short and written in a steady, confident hand. "Ms. Monroe, I know an apology cannot undo my complicity in the events of that evening, but I offer it anyway. I was captivated by a world I thought I wanted, and I failed to see the true cost of admission. That night, you showed me what real strength and success look like. It isn't about what you can acquire, it's about what you can create. Thank you for that lesson. I have returned to my own original passion, landscape architecture. It seems I have some creating of my own to do. I hope you enjoy the book. It felt appropriate. Sincerely, Victoria Carrington." Serafina closed the note, a genuine warm smile touching her lips. This was an outcome she had never anticipated. It was a grace note in a story she thought had ended. The encounter hadn't just liberated her, it had, in its own way, liberated Victoria too. Two women, connected by one man's ego, were now both free and moving forward on their own terms. She placed the book on her drafting table next to the blueprints for her new foundation. She looked from the book to her plans, from the past to the future. The last shadow of Marcus Thorne and the life she'd had with him was gone, replaced by the bright, promising light of what was to come. She picked up her charcoal pencil, the familiar weight of it a comfort in her hand. There were new worlds to design, new dreams to build, and this time she was the sole architect. 6 months had passed since the night Marcus Thorne's world had been dismantled in the solarium. Winter had given way to a brisk, hopeful spring, and the city felt alive with a sense of renewal that mirrored Serafina Monroe's own spirit. The Argento Grand continued to thrive, a silent testament to her vision, but her focus had shifted. The Monroe Foundation for the Arts was no longer a dream sketched on a blueprint. It was a reality housed in a sleek downtown office and backed by a board of trustees that included a smattering of the city's most respected cultural patrons, with Alistair Finch serving as its diligent treasurer. The foundation's inaugural project was ambitious: the rejuvenation of the old Blackwood rail yard, a 3-acre scar of derelict land on the city's industrial fringe. Where others saw rust and ruin, Serafina saw a canvas. Her vision was for the Argento Art Garden, a public space that would weave together sculpture, native flora, and community gathering spots, a place of beauty and peace for a neighborhood that had little of either. The foundation had put out a blind call for proposals for the landscape architecture, seeking a design that was not just beautiful, but soulful. Far across town, in a cramped office that smelled of coffee and damp soil, Victoria Carrington was charting her own renewal. She had started Carrington Design with the last of her savings, the gaudy diamond ring having been quietly sold and the money donated to a women's shelter. Her life was a world away from the one she had shared with Marcus. The opulent galas were replaced by city planning meetings, the designer gowns by practical boots, and the empty flattery by the satisfying exhaustion that came from hard, meaningful work. She had landed a few small projects, a suburban backyard, a corporate rooftop terrace, but she yearned for something that mattered. When she saw the Monroe Foundation's call for proposals for the Blackwood Railyard project, her heart leapt. It was exactly the kind of transformative work she dreamed of doing. Then she saw the name of the foundation, Monroe. A wave of apprehension washed over her. To work on a project helmed by Serafina Monroe felt complicated. It felt like trespassing on a part of her life she had fought hard to leave behind. For a full day, she tried to forget about it, telling herself it was too big, too high profile, that she would never stand a chance. But the idea wouldn't leave her. The rail yard, a broken and forgotten place, waiting to be given new life, resonated with a part of her soul. She thought of Serafina's quiet strength, the way she had built an empire from her own spirit. It wasn't a reason to stay away. It was an inspiration to try. She would submit her proposal under her company's name and let the work speak for itself. For the next 2 weeks, Victoria poured every ounce of herself into the design. She spent days at the rail yard, sketching the twisted metal mapping, the way the light fell across the cracked concrete. Her design was radical. Instead of erasing the industrial past, she honored it. The old railway tracks became pathways lined with beds of resilient wildflowers. A rusted skeletal gantry crane was to be transformed into a massive living sculpture draped with flowering vines. Her central concept was kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold, celebrating the cracks and fissures as part of the object's history. Her garden would be a place where the city's scars were not hidden, but illuminated. She submitted the proposal electronically, her heart pounding, and tried to put it out of her mind. Meanwhile, in the Monroe Foundation's boardroom, Serafina and her board reviewed the final 5 submissions, which had been anonymized by a junior committee. The designs were all competent, but 4 of them were conventional, safe green spaces that could have been anywhere. Then, they came to the 5th proposal, titled The Kintsugi Garden. Silence fell over the room as they studied the renderings. Alistair Finch was the first to speak. "My word," he murmured, adjusting his glasses. "This isn't just a garden, it's a poem." The design was bold, poignant, and deeply intelligent. It was the only one that truly understood the spirit of the project. Serafina felt a profound connection to it, a sense of recognition as if the anonymous designer had somehow looked into her own soul. "This is the one," Serafina said, her voice filled with conviction. "This designer understands that beauty isn't about perfection. It's about resilience." The vote was unanimous. The project director then brought in the file, revealing the identity of the winning firm. She opened it and read the name aloud. The design was submitted by a new local firm, Carrington Design. Serafina's composure was absolute, but a flicker of astonishment registered in her eyes. Alistair Finch met her gaze from across the table, his expression unreadable, but for a slight supportive nod. He had seen the name on the initial long list, but had trusted the blind review process and trusted Serafina. The other board members, unaware of the personal history, were simply excited. Carrington Design, one of them mused. "A new player. Excellent. Let's invite them in to present their formal pitch next week. I'm eager to meet the mind behind this." Serafina's mind raced. Victoria. Of all the architects in all the city, she could have vetoed it. She could have claimed a conflict of interest. But looking again at the brilliant, heartfelt design on the screen before her, she knew that would be a betrayal of everything her foundation stood for. The work was the work. It was magnificent. The past would not be allowed to cast its shadow over the future. "Set up the meeting," Serafina said, her voice even. "I'm eager to meet them too." A week later, Victoria walked into the foundation's boardroom, her portfolio clutched in her hand. She had been told she would be presenting to the final selection committee, but she had not been told who chaired it. She felt a nervous, hopeful energy. This was her chance, the moment that could define her new career. She looked up and her breath caught in her throat. At the head of the long mahogany table, elegant and poised in a charcoal grey suit, was Seraphina Monroe. For a terrifying second, Victoria felt the floor drop out from under her. The boardroom, the portfolio, her carefully rehearsed speech. It all vanished, replaced by the memory of a glass-enclosed dining room and a diamond ring sitting on a tablecloth. She wanted to turn and flee. But then she saw the expression on Seraphina's face. It was not one of judgment or anger or pity. It was one of calm, professional neutrality, perhaps, with a hint of curiosity. There was no ghost in the room. There were only professionals. That look gave Victoria the anchor she needed. She had come here as a designer, not as Marcus Thorne's ex-fiancée. She would act like one. She took a deep breath, walked to the podium, and began. Good morning. My name is Victoria Carrington. My design for the Blackwood Rail Yard is based on a single powerful idea that we find the greatest beauty, not in spite of our imperfections, but because of them. As she spoke, a transformation occurred. The nervousness melted away, replaced by the pure passion she felt for her work. She spoke of how the rigid lines of the old tracks would guide visitors towards soft, contemplative spaces. She described how the gantry crane, once a symbol of hard, relentless labor, would become a cathedral of blossoms, a testament to nature's ability to reclaim and soften the harshest of structures. She wasn't just presenting a design, she was telling a story of healing and rebirth. Her own story. Seraphina listened utterly captivated. She saw nothing of the polished, deferential woman from the hotel. She saw a brilliant artist in her own right, fierce, articulate, and deeply talented. She saw how Victoria's personal journey had informed her work, giving it a depth and authenticity that no other proposal had possessed. She had been broken, and she had chosen to mend herself with gold. When Victoria finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then, one of the board members began to applaud, and soon the entire room joined in. Victoria's face flushed with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Seraphina let the applause die down before she spoke, her voice clear and carrying across the room. Thank you, Ms. Carrington. That was an extraordinary presentation. Your vision for the project is not only what we were hoping for, it exceeds it in every way. The board is in agreement. She stood up and walked around the table, extending her hand to Victoria. On behalf of the Monroe Foundation, Seraphina said, her eyes meeting Victoria's with unmistakable, professional respect, we would be honored to offer the contract for the Argento Art Garden to Carrington Design. Victoria took her hand. The handshake was firm, solid. It was not the handshake of an ex-wife and an ex-fiancé. It was the handshake of two creators, two businesswomen, two architects of their own lives. In that moment, the last vestiges of their shared past with Marcus Thorne dissolved, rendered utterly irrelevant. It was a new blueprint for a new and far more beautiful creation. And so Seraphina's story isn't just about getting even. It's a powerful reminder that the best revenge is not revenge at all. It's building a life so full and successful that the past no longer has any power over you. Marcus Thorne came looking for an audience for his triumph, but instead he got a front row seat to his own obsolescence. He learned that true power isn't about flaunting what you have, but about the quiet confidence that comes from what you've built. What do you think? Was Seraphina's quiet, decisive action the perfect response, or would you have handled it differently? Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone's arrogance led to their own spectacular downfall? Let me know your thoughts and your own stories in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and empowerment, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next real-life drama. Thanks for listening.